Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Greene for the Whiny Palooza podcast, and I am very excited today because I get to talk to the wonderful Carrie Rickert. Carrie, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Absolutely. It is such an honor to be here.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about this fabulous lady. She is a seasoned business and life coach, consultant, and team lead for the System for Integrated Growth program. She has recently penned a book that sheds light on an unconventional yet profoundly inspiring concept: trauma as a catalyst for positive transformation. Her work, Trauma is a Catalyst, offers a fresh perspective on personal development. And as I told Carrie before we started recording, I haven't really done much on trauma. So I am like really excited to talk about this. This is a great topic. I want to hear all about it and all about your book. And I want to start with asking you a deep question. Can you
All
tell us,
right.
can you tell us how trauma can catalyze positive changes in one's life? Because that is crazy to me.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I agree with you that it does seem crazy, right? Like you think about all the bad things that have happened to people, and I can certainly speak for myself. Like things happen and you kind of have a choice, right? You can get mired down by those things, or you can use your experience of those things to make positive changes in your life. And for me, the and what my book is about is my own traumatic experience. I was involved in a very bad car accident. I hydroplaned into the back of a tractor trailer. I do not recommend that to anyone.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so as a result of that, I spent 4+ weeks in University of Maryland shock trauma. I had a traumatic brain injury.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
my hand had to be completely reconstructed, and it was a long road back. And it's interesting because I don't at all remember the accident. I was traveling with a coworker who was also injured, but fortunately not as badly as I was. I was driving, and we were driving to a work from our office to a work event, and it was evidently raining very hard. And like I said, I don't really remember anything about the accident. I remember waking up in the hospital and thinking, oh, okay, I guess this is where I need to be right now.
Oh,
Like it was, I mean, and my I was so fortunate because my parents were leaving for vacation the day that I got in my accident, and they turned around and went straight to the hospital. And so I had 4 weeks in shock trauma with multiple surgeries, and then a couple other weeks in a rehab hospital. And then I went home, and it was a shock to the system, right? Like when you're in the hospital, the only thing that you can focus on is getting better. And I understand that a lot of people who have traumatic brain injuries um, tend to feel like, oh, I am never going to get better. Like this is not, and become very depressed. And I guess because I had small children and I was newly separated from my husband at the time,
oh,
like we had just basically a couple months prior moved into a new place, and like my kids were getting used to the split, and then it was 6 weeks without mom at all. And and they were 8 and 4 at the time.
I was just going to ask you. So they were really
Yeah,
little.
they were little. Yeah, so it was, so I had a lot to live for. I had a lot to not only live for, but like be the best that I could be for. I wanted them to have a parent that was able to participate in their lives. And so I looked at every aspect of my recovery in the hospital and in rehab as, okay, what else can I do? Okay, what else can I do? And then I went home and I couldn't go to work. I couldn't drive because it turns out that when you have a brain injury, they don't just give you back your license. You have to test for it again.
Oh, goodness, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I didn't know that either. I learned that. And so I also had a totaled car, so I had to like get a whole new car. My parents moved in with me for 2.5 months till I got my license and like really got back on my feet. But when my kids were at school or daycare, I didn't have any of the things that I had previously had occupying my mind. And I could have very easily gotten sucked into just an abyss, right? Like,
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
is never going to change. I am going to be like hopeless forever. And fortunately, I started writing. And, because that really helped me. I started writing a blog, and that helped me process all of the things that I was going through. And I tend to be a pretty positive person in general. Um, but trying to figure out like, okay, well, what is going to work the same as it used to? What isn't going to work the same? And how do I adjust to that and create a new life? And so, I figured out quickly that at that time I could not go back to work full time. I wanted to, I tried. And after about 2 weeks, I'm like, I'm not ready yet. I can't do this. So I ended up leaving that role and starting my own consulting business, and just got into it very, very slowly, trying to figure things out. And I continued writing. And I look back at all of that right now, Rebecca, and I don't want the accident to have never occurred. Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, there were some really, really awful things. And all of those things have made me resilient. I have been able to persist against some pretty major obstacles. And I've created a really amazing life. I participate with my kids. I get to do all the things I wanted to do. Are things perfect? No, absolutely not. And I would say that things aren't perfect for anyone. I have some things that still bother me. I have chronic pain in my hand. I lost the hearing in my left ear. So, like, there are things that I've had to adjust for. But, like, if I hadn't had this, I would have a totally different life, and it might not be as amazing as my life is. Like, I'm lucky.
Wow. I'm so happy that you're saying that. And I'm wondering, you know, it's probably changed your outlook on life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I have always been a plan ahead kind of person. I'm very fast paced. I like to get things done. I like to know exactly what's happening for the coming weeks. And the accident made me sit still. And I've never been somebody who sits still. I still struggle with it, but I at least know that it is a good thing. So I think the perspective shift is, instead of constantly being future focused, I am more focused on the present, and I work very hard to stay focused on the present and not be attached to the outcome of things.
Mm,
Because my experience has been that things work out however it is that they're going to work out, and I can make it good or bad, but things will work out some way or another. And if I am focusing on what's right in front of me, what is right here, right now, I can do the best that I can do with right now. And that will set my future up just fine.
I love that. We're always rushing. My husband even
Yes,
points it out to me. He's like, "Can you just slow down? Slow down."
it's it's so hard, and I still tend to, like, I have to stop myself. Um,
Me
but
too.
I think my accident has really allowed me to be able to do that. Like, oh, this isn't a life or death situation right now. Like, yes, I would like to be able to do this, but if it doesn't happen, it's okay. Like, something else will come my way, or, like, I'll have another opportunity, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, I would guess that it was a process for you to get there because,
Oh, for sure.
it's quite the journey through trauma. And I'm wondering if you can tell people about the stages, the pivotal stages that you talk about.
Sure. So, at the beginning, while I was in the hospital, it was just very much, what do I need to do to get better?
Mm,
Um, so that was occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, that was physical therapy, and to be fair, I had I exceeded the outcomes relative to my injuries by a long shot. So I get that not everybody who has had similar injuries to me has the same experience. They don't. Um, I had amazing doctors, amazing supportive family. I so in that initial stage, it was just, this is where I am right now. I need to do the best that I can with what I have,
yeah.
right? And then once I got home from the hospital, it was, okay, so what do I do now? I'm not sure what to do. Like, can't go to work. I still have outpatient therapies. I need to do something. Like, here I am, a single mom, trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay my bills? I can't rely on my parents forever. And it was a workers' comp case, which, again, I am lucky about that, right? So, like, all of my care was covered, because if it wasn't, I would have been bankrupt. I mean,
Yes.
I had millions of dollars worth of surgeries.
I was thinking about the finances with just not being able to
Yeah,
work. Yeah.
right. I mean, just paying my rent and my daycare providers and everything. Like, I was like, I don't even know. Like, what do I do? So once I realized I couldn't go back to work full time and work like my 60 plus hour week, right, that I had been doing,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
I was like, okay, so let's figure out what I can do. Um, who I need to contact. So it was a lot of like reaching out to people that I've worked with before and figuring out what I can do um, to get my brain back into work mode. Um, and all the while, I continued writing. So the book, the first part of my book just is my mom's journal entries from shock trauma and
Oh my
rehab.
gosh.
So my mom is a retired ICU nurse and rehab nurse. So I was incredibly fortunate to have
Wow.
someone with that experience as an advocate who also never left the hospital.
I
Like,
got chills when you said
I
that. That
know
is amazing.
it was so amazing. So she wrote on, there's a site called Caring Bridge. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but so Caring Bridge is it's like a journal entry kind of thing, but it is a public thing. So my mom could talk about what was happening to me and everybody who was following it. So all of my friends and family members and, people near and far could follow along and find out what was happening with me at the time. And shockingly, there were a lot of people who followed me.
Oh,
And like it was just amazing. It was amazing. I mean, I had people all over not only the country but the world. Like sending me prayers and good vibes and like all of the things and I think that was enormously helpful. So then the second part of my book is my blog, right? So from that beginning time, like how am I processing through all of this change and not understanding like how am I going to make this work and what else can I be doing that could help me. And I think writing was my biggest processing piece.
yeah,
Um,
makes sense.
and then the last part of it is kind of like where I am now, or like a year ago. Um, but but so I think that relative to the journey, that second piece of like, oh my God, I don't know what's happening and trying to navigate myself out of that. I think that's where additional resources could have been really helpful. And that's part of the thing that I really want to push with people is that there are resources out there. The Brain Injury Association of America has chapters all over the country. Um, and there's a trauma survivors network in all of the level 1, level 2 trauma centers. I didn't know about much of that. Like it's possible that people told me when I was in the hospital, but you know, I had a brain injury. Memory wasn't really,
Oh, good point.
and my mom, of course, was completely stressed out. Like she was watching all these things happening to me and knowing what the outcomes should have been, right? That fortunately weren't. Um, I had some life-saving surgeries that could have very easily turned out differently. And, sometimes knowing too much is harder than when you're just like, okay, well, just pray that everything is going to go well. Because my mom was like, this could be bad, like she
Yeah.
knew.
She knew what was going on. She was the
Yeah.
perfect person to be there with you though, because
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
educated.
Yeah.
Well, and like as you're describing these stages that you've gone through, I mean, I'm thinking about the person who I think that what is hitting me is that you really had some great support. And I mean,
Amazing.
obviously people need that, but for somebody who is struggling, they're post-trauma and they're not moving through stages. I mean,
Yeah.
any steps that you can recommend that they start taking?
So yeah, I would say so this is the interesting thing. I had enormous support. No one in my support system had ever had a brain injury. No one in my support system had ever had a catastrophic accident like I did. And so, even though I had that support and I knew that, my family and friends were sticking by me and cared about me, I still felt isolated and alone
Oh,
because I was the only one, like, they weren't in my mind, right? They didn't know specifically. And I think that is the case for anyone who experiences trauma, any kind of trauma. People may have similar things happen to them, but it is also uniquely yours.
right. Yeah.
And that can be very isolating. So, my suggestions would always be to reach out to, if you've had a brain injury, reach out to the Brain Injury Association in whatever chapter that is in your state. Um, the trauma survivor networks have monthly support groups that are virtual and they have in-person ones. So you can find something so that you can at least talk about what's going on with you and see that you aren't actually alone in some of these experiences. Like the brain fog and fatigue that you get after a brain injury is can be almost debilitating. Like I would, once I got my driver's license back, anytime I drove more than like around my little neighborhood area, I would have to like I needed like an hour to just decompress. So the other thing I would say is give yourself some grace, um, and look for some alternative methods of pain relief, of you know suffering relief. Like I have found a lot of help through acupuncture. I have done a lot of PTSD work with my acupuncturist. It has also helped my chronic pain. Um, Meditation has been really good for me. And again, that's the like me fighting against the need to continuously move, right?
Yeah.
And that has been enormously helpful. Like it's okay to sit still. I had to reframe that in my mind. And for anyone who is like a go-getter like I am, to like, oh, sometimes I actually have to like stop and heal. Huh, that's a new one. you know?
Right. Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't imagine going from 60 hours a week to having to sit still in a hospital.
I it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And also, I would say that my life was careening out of control at that point. I was working as much as I possibly could. I had, just separated from my ex-husband. I had was working on single parenting. Like I had all of these things. So having 6 weeks where I only focused on my physical health was really great for my mental health.
I
And
bet.
it allowed me to prioritize like, okay, what is actually important here? And what is important, what was important back then, it's all the same. It's my family, it's my kids.
Yeah. I'm wondering how you worked 60 hours a week with two little kids.
It was pretty crazy. I would I would drop them off, go into work,
Oh my
uh,
God.
work. Then I would come home, get them all together, like bed, bathe, bedtime, and then go back to work.
Oh
So
my,
like just virtually, it was just constant. It was insane.
wow. That's a lot. That is a,
Yeah, it is. And it's not healthy for anyone to do that.
no.
And so like for me, it took a traumatic event to realize that.
Oh gosh.
Like that's
Well,
crazy.
I mean, it's terrible what you went through, but I love that it changed so many things for you. And I'm wondering, I don't know what the memory was of the accident. You might not have any memories, but like, do you have any like, did you have to deal with flashbacks or anything from the accident?
I did not. And to be honest, I remember slivers of things. Like I remember going down the elevator from the building, from my office building to get in the car. I remember the conversation that Emily and I had. She was the coworker that went with me. I remember that we were talking about how my car needed an oil change. And so she was trying to find Jiffy Lubes nearby that I could get my oil change. Turns out I
Oh,
did not need to get my oil changed after that.
bye bye car, bye bye
Yeah, I
car.
needed a whole new car. So,
Oh my God.
but like those little things are what I remember. I do not remember the accident at all. I get incredibly nervous, not so much now because I've done a lot of PTSD treatment, but like certainly in the first couple of years, driving on the Beltway or on an interstate with large trucks, really, like, I would get super nervous. I still have trouble driving with women in my passenger seat. Like, my kids, I'm okay with. They weren't in the car with me. Even men in my passenger seat, I'm okay with that. Women in
Wow.
my passenger seat make me nervous.
I would think rain would make me nervous. It makes me nervous
Oh,
now. It makes me nervous now.
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, like, if it's raining more than a sprinkle or two, I usually just pull over.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I was
Yeah.
very worried. I heard a storm was coming and we were 40 minutes away yesterday and it started to rain and I'm like, we're leaving.
Yeah.
We're on the freeway. Let's go.
Well, because you never, I mean, you never know.
I know.
You never know.
Yeah, I don't love the driving in the rain and that's really scary what can happen when you're driving in the
Right?
rain.
Right?
So
Absolutely.
you talked about something really important that people need to hear. You mentioned the PTSD work that you've done.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a little bit about that for people?
Sure. So I did some trauma therapy. So I've worked with therapists that were specific for trauma. Interestingly enough, and this is something that I would recommend to anyone who has been through any kind of traumatic experience, find a therapist that is trauma informed, that works with people who have had trauma. Um, I was mental health was kind of the not really mentioned in the hospital to me
Right, right.
because they
Too
were
busy making you alive.
right. So, and Western medicine, unfortunately, is very siloed. So,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there were all of these things that were going on at the same time, and they were all very individual. Like it was my therapies, it was my surgeries, it was, and my hand different to my brain, and it was like all of these things. And there was not a holistic approach, just because our systems aren't set up like that.
Mm-mm.
And so, finding a good trauma therapist is a great idea to process through things. I probably should have done that longer than I did. And but then I started going to acupuncture mostly because of my chronic pain. Because my coworker Emily had told me she went to acupuncture for her pain from the same accident, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And her boss actually goes, or at the time went to my acupuncturist, so I got a referral.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and so I went in first just about pain. And then as we were continuing to talk, and I'm like, yeah, like I get all of this like neck and shoulder pain because of tension. And like when I'm driving, it's so much worse. Like I just grip the wheel and slowly my acupuncturist started talking about like, okay, well, we can certainly continue to treat the symptoms and the pain and all of that, but there are some other options that we can start doing some treatments, some more spiritual treatments with acupuncture. And I will tell you that has made a world of difference for me and what I am able to tolerate driving wise.
That's
It's
amazing.
just been unbelievable. So I would say explore other avenues.
Yeah.
There are so many things available, and acupuncture may not work for you, but Reiki might, or meditation might, or yoga might, or, like there's trauma informed yoga. There's so much out there that I didn't know because I didn't need it before.
Well, I'm so glad you explored other avenues. And you
Me
wonder
too.
if the hospital staff even know about effective other strategies. That's something that it would be wonderful that if they learned that.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that because I am actually talking to the Southeast Trauma Symposium later this week, and
Wonderful.
and I am gonna and the focus of my talk is about like, hey, like a more holistic approach might be
Yes.
really beneficial to the outcomes that your patients have. And I get
100%.
that, like I'm not blaming anyone for the excellent care that I got in both
Sure.
hospitals. Like I mean, I had doctors save my life multiple times, right? So, like, I'm not complaining about that. I just feel like we could look at things more holistically.
Right.
And, and I think too, I was so lucky because I had an advocate. I had a case manager with workers' comp, and I had my mom. How many people get into catastrophic traumatic events and don't have an advocate?
Mm,
And that is something every patient should have.
I couldn't agree more. That's such a good point. And I think that you are probably such a resilient person now, not that you weren't before, but can you tell us what you've learned about resilience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, about several years after my accident, but like as I'm getting my feet under me and everything, my house was hit by a tornado.
What?
I
Oh
know
my God.
it, it's like a bad joke, right? So I, fortunately, my kids were at their dad's when it happened,
Oh
and
my,
his house wasn't damaged. Um, I lost a third of my roof and had all kinds of issues. But I took it in stride, right? I'm like, okay, we're alive. the important things are still here. Like I didn't lose any of my artwork or my antique furniture. Like the only things that I cared about in my house, like I'm not attached to things so much anymore. And I think that's a part of
Yeah.
resilience is
Yeah.
to like, yeah, I like the stuff that I have, but could I like leave it? Sure, no problem. Now, the artwork that my very talented aunt and cousin both did, I would be devastated if I lost that. But but like I I have learned that the important things are still the important things, and the rest of it is just icing.
Yeah.
You know, like the cake is my family. The
Yeah.
cake is having a place to live. It is having friends and family who are supportive. It is not the stuff. It is not the,
Priorities is the word going through my head. Priorities.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think understanding those priorities is the biggest part of resilience.
It's really good advice. I'm wondering what your core message is from your book that you want people to take away from it.
So I would say that you're not alone, that talking about your experience just brings more people in, and you will find people that have had similar experiences, not necessarily the same, but have had some measure of, oh, I experienced that when I had my trauma. And like I tended to worry so much about talking too much about my accident. Like it was like a when are you going to get better kind of thing, but that was more in my head than it was in anyone else's. But when you have invisible injuries, like, and for the most part look and act normal, it is really challenging to not feel like you are harping on something that it could very easily still be giving you a lot of problems. This is why it's important to not isolate yourself. There are people around that can help. There are therapists, there are support groups, there are other modes of healthcare. Um, and also, I hope that my book gives people a spark of hope.
I love that.
Yeah.
I, I would imagine anyone who has gone through trauma, who hears your story and where you are now, would feel very inspired.
I hope so, not because like I'm anything magical. I just want them to believe that I want people who have experienced trauma to believe that they can get to a different version, and that different version can be great.
I love that. That's beautiful. I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything important that I didn't ask you?
No, I think you covered all of it. This
I
has
tried.
been
I tried.
yeah, I mean, I would just say the important pieces are find what works for you, but keep looking for things that work. Don't just go inside.
I love it. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and you sharing with us. Can you tell everyone where they can find you and your book?
Sure. My website is carrierickert.com. That's CarrieRickert.com. And my book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, any of those outlets. And you can also, there's also a link on my website to the book.
Wonderful. It sounds like an amazing book. I would be so
Thank
curious,
you.
not just about what you had to write, but what your mom had to write. Because that is
Oh,
unique that you included that. I love that you did that.
and interestingly, I had friends say to me, I can't read the first part again.
I know it was
I
fun.
I
Yeah.
can't live
Oh,
through that again. I just
no.
can't. And I'm like, I understand that first part is for context for people who don't know my story. Like, it's
Oh my
okay.
gosh. Well, it sounds fantastic, and I'm so happy for you to hear where you
Thank
are
you.
now. And I'm so sorry for what you went through. And I just appreciate you sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. This is Rebecca Greene, and I want to remind everyone to spend every day laughing, learning, and loving. Thank you for tuning in to the Whiny Palooza podcast. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. While you are there, leave a review. I love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
This show has been produced by Market Domination LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.